Good morning, friend. Welcome back to my kitchen. If you're new, my name is Becky, and today we are doing a big baking day. Huge. Probably one of the biggest baking days I have ever had. Tomorrow, I am doing a big freezer cooking day, and I want to prep all of the bread products I need for tomorrow today. So this is going to be fun. Let me show you kind of how I am breaking up this baking day and what my goals for the day are. We're going to be making 4 loaves of sandwich bread to turn into Uncrustables that we're going to make tomorrow. And then it'll be nice just to have some homemade bread on hand. We're going to make some high protein bagels. We're going to make some small ones and large ones because we're going to be making some pesto mozzarella bacon bagel sandwiches tomorrow. So I want to use the bagels for that. And then we're also going to be making some bagel bites or pizza bites. So we need bagels for that. I'm going to make hamburger buns because one of the dinners I'm going to be prepping is going to be Philly cheesesteak sloppy joes tomorrow. So I'm going to have hamburger buns that I'm going to make today. I can throw those in the freezer along with the Philly cheesesteak sloppy joes that I'm going to make tomorrow. And then when we want sloppy joes, I don't have to make the buns and I don't have to make the sloppy joes. I buy hamburger buns, throw them in the freezer all the time. I've never made my own to do that, so I figured, why don't I give it a try? We have been loving homemade hamburger buns lately, and then I'm gonna make a harvest waffle with carrots and pumpkin, and then we're gonna make blueberry pancakes. Now the waffles and blueberry pancakes are just meal prep for breakfast, but the other 3 items are going to be for 4 different recipes that we're going to prep tomorrow. I will link all of the recipes that I'm going to be making down in the description box, along with some of the equipment that I'm going to be using today if you're interested in it, because a lot of the flour we're going to be using, not all of it, but a lot of it we're going to be using today is actually going to be some fresh milled flour. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually mill up my flour, and I'm going to start by milling up hard white wheat. We're going to be milling up some kamut. I'm gonna also mill up a little bit of hard red wheat. So the first thing I'm gonna do is just get this grinder on, or mill on. While the flour is grinding or milling, I'm gonna go ahead and measure out the rest of the ingredients we need for our sandwich bread recipe. I only one other time have attempted to make a 100% fresh milled sandwich bread. I made up my own recipe. I tried to convert my all-purpose flour bread recipe into a fresh milled flour bread recipe, and the flavor was delicious, but it was dense and one would say not very delicious, but the flavor was there. It just didn't have a good texture. So I'm going to use my cookbook that is all recipes with 100% fresh milled grain in them. I've used this and made, I think, like 6 or maybe 10 of her recipes out of here, and they've all turned out really well. So I figured instead of trying to make up my own recipe, why don't I use one that I'm sure is going to turn out delicious? So I will link her cookbook. I'm going to link links to recipes that we're going to make, where if you don't want to get the cookbook, you can go on her blog. She has the recipes on her blog. And also, if you don't have your own grain mill and you are just starting to learn how to make homemade baked goods and fresh milling wheat seems intimidating to you or something you're not interested in, I will also link hot dog bun recipes, pancake recipes, all the recipes we're going to be making today, but in all-purpose flour, if that's what you're comfortable using and that's what you have on hand. I didn't start making fresh milled flour baked goods until I think like 4 months ago. Maybe it's been 5 months ago now, and I'm having a lot of fun with it, but it took me years to finally order one of these grain mills and then start getting comfortable with it. So I just want to let you know that you can follow the recipes down below that I think are delicious that use all-purpose flour as well. One of my goals for this year is, though, to get super comfortable using fresh milled wheat. It tastes so good. There's just kind of a little bit of a learning curve when it comes to working with fresh milled flour. And one of the best things that I have noticed that a lot of recipes say that seems to work really well, because when I've skipped this step, things don't work out well. It's actually to soak the grains in the liquid before you add your leavening agents. And I'll go more into that as we keep baking. But here I have my warmed water, my warmed milk. I'm going to add the sweetener, which is honey. I'm going to get that in there. I did spray my measuring spoon a bit before I started measuring out the honey, because then it would slip out a little bit easier from the measuring spoon. We're going to add our eggs and some other ingredients, and then we can add our flour. Now, the one thing about this bake day that I do have to give my grain mill some rest time between milling. It can mill about 10-12 cups of grain before it needs about a 10-minute break. And because we're going to be milling so much flour, it does need some rest time. At this point, we have all of our ingredients in there except for our flours. And I am going to weigh out these flours because it gives me weight measurements in the book. I didn't weigh anything else out, but the flour is kind of important here. And this is the first time I am attempting to make 100% fresh milled sandwich bread that's this recipe. I tried adapting my own recipe and it was very delicious, but very, very dense. I forgot about that till just now. So I'm hoping that by following this recipe, it's gonna turn out perfect. So I've got my scale here and I need to remember that I am doubling this recipe. So I sure hope I can fit a double batch in here because this is going to be 4 very large loaves of bread. So we need 810 grams of the hard white wheat times 2. I don't even know if I actually made enough of this hard white wheat. I didn't. Oh gosh, I don't know if this is going to fit in here. 810 grams. That's that right there. And then we need 160 grams of kamut. So I'm going to zero this out. I want to do this so I don't mess it up. So I'm going to go grind a bunch more hard white wheat, and then I can add that to that. And I think once I get this all mixed, I'm gonna have to pull out my other mixer and have 2 mixers going. I'm wanting to start with the yeast bread recipes because these obviously have to take time to rise before we can bake them. That sound doesn't sound great, but you always want to start this machine with no grain in it, and you want to let it run with no grain in it for a few seconds so that it gets cleaned out. So here is our second batch of hard white wheat, and we need to get this in here. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to fit all this in here. Yeah, we'll have to see once it gets mixed up. And I'm gonna let my mixer now have a break for a few minutes because I do not want it to get overheated. Oh, error. Okay, we're at 600, so I need to add 210. Let's see if I can use this bowl. Well, we'll just start with this. I need 100 more grams of flour. Let's see if we can even mix this up. Oh, I think that's gonna work just fine. So let me grind up 110 more grams and I'll add this to this as this mixes. This time I ground up 110 grams of hard red wheat. Let me get this mixed in there. And you'll notice that I have not added any yeast yet. When working with fresh milled flour, the germ and bran are still in the flour because we didn't sift anything out. And that's what has the fiber in it. And that fiber takes time to absorb the moisture. So this looks very, very wet right now. It almost looks like a batter. I'm gonna mix this for a few more minutes, and then I'm gonna let it sit with the mixer off, no yeast in it, and we're gonna let that germ and bran absorb the moisture, and that way we'll get a better idea if we do need to add more flour at that point. But at this point, we just want that wheat to start hydrating in the moisture that is in this dough. So I'm gonna turn this off, and we're gonna let this sit for about 15 to 20 minutes, just like this, no yeast. And while this is resting and my mill is resting just a bit, I'm gonna go ahead and weigh out and measure out the ingredients I need for our hamburger buns, because our hamburger buns can be all the ingredients can be weighed out and things like that while I'm waiting. I don't want to just sit here idly. So in here, I have 2 cups of water. I'm going to use the hamburger bun recipe from the same cookbook that I'm getting this bread recipe from. I have made these before, and they are incredibly delicious. I'm going to measure out my wheat berries into this bowl. And this recipe calls for hard white wheat like we used in here, but also spelt. And I'm pretty sure I still have some spelt. Well, I don't have very much, so I'm gonna have to get some more. So I won't be able to use as much spelt as this recipe calls for, because it calls for 80 grams. So I need 160 grams of spelt. And that's only 50. So maybe we'll use kamut for the rest. And I'm out of my hard white wheat in here in that jar, but luckily I buy my wheat berries in bulk. This is hard white wheat, and I am actually getting pretty low, so I'm gonna need to place another order. That's all I have left because we have been making so much delicious bread products with our fresh milled wheat. Hopefully I have enough to get through this day. So I need 840 grams of hard white wheat. And this is for a double batch. Oh. That's good. The next thing I need to melt is 8 tablespoons of butter. I always use salted butter because that's the only kind of butter I buy. I also popped in the microwave my water and sugar mixture so that my sugar would dissolve a little bit. If you're wondering why my water is brown, it's because the sugar that I use is a raw cane sugar, and so it still has some of the molasses in it. So at this point, I think my mill has rested enough. I'm gonna take my pre-measured out grain here, and we're gonna mill this grain directly into our KitchenAid bowl. We're gonna give our grinder another rest here after milling up that grain. We're gonna get this into our mixer along with our water that has now basically dissolved almost all of that sugar. A little bit didn't get dissolved, but that's fine, it will. As it sits here, our butter. We're gonna add 2 eggs to our dough. And again, I'm adding all the ingredients to this dough minus the yeast, because we're gonna do the same thing where we're gonna let this sit after it's been mixed for about 10 to 15 minutes. This is now all mixed together. All I'm gonna do is turn this off and we're gonna let this rest. I think I'm gonna go ahead and cover it with a towel. Now we have our 2 yeasted doughs done. I don't know why I've never thought about making hamburger buns for the freezer before, because I buy hamburger buns and throw them in the freezer. I mean, not all the time, but on a regular basis. So this is gonna be exciting to see how this works out. This dough, I think, is ready for the actual kneading process at this point. But before we actually knead it, we need to add our yeast. And we're gonna use instant yeast this time. And I just got a new one, so it should be good to go. And for a double batch, we need 2 tablespoons plus 2 teaspoons. This is a half teaspoon, so I'm gonna put 4 of these in there. Now we're gonna mix this together. Now the crazy thing about this recipe, which I did not realize till after I already started it, is that this needs to knead for 15 to 20 minutes. It looks pretty wet at this point, but hopefully with the kneading process that will kind of absorb some of that liquid, and with the gluten structure, it'll become more of a structured dough. And before we go much farther, I'm just going to read each of the ingredients to make sure we have everything. For a double large bread pan loaf, we needed our 2 different types of flour, water, milk, butter, honey or sugar, salt, eggs, and instant yeast. We're good to go there. Turn it on, let it go. Now, because I've got 2 things going, my hamburger buns are resting, this sandwich bread is mixing, I'm not going to be idle in here. I want this to rest a little bit longer because it now has ground up 20 plus cups of flour, so it needs a little bit of a break. I'm just going to start measuring out the ingredients for the other recipes while everything is kind of doing its thing. This next thing that I'm going to do is get ready to make the high protein. They're called high protein bagels, but technically they're not a bagel because they don't have any yeast in them and you don't boil them, but they're in the shape of a bagel. And I made these one other time, but I used all-purpose flour, and the only ingredients in it is cottage cheese, flour, baking soda, and salt. Super, super easy. And then you shape them and bake them. And I wanted to try this with fresh milled wheat because I made it last time with just white all-purpose flour, making it as the recipe said. And I want to go ahead and experiment. I probably should not have experimented with a triple batch, but I did that, and I can just tell you now they turned out great. The only thing is I did not blend the cottage cheese as much as I blended it the first time. So if I do it again, just make sure you blend up your cottage cheese really, really nice and smooth. I added my yeast to my hamburger buns. So at this point I have 2 mixers going. I have my sandwich bread with the yeast mixing. I have my hamburger buns with the yeast now mixing or kneading. Technically both of these are kneading. And now I'm going to measure out some of the ingredients we need for, I think these are for the pancakes or for the waffles. I can't remember now. Oh, this is for the waffles, the harvest waffles. I'm going to add both pumpkin and grated carrots to these waffles. I'm making a harvest waffle. The recipe did not call for pumpkin and or carrots, but I'm following a recipe. I substituted some of the buttermilk for pumpkin, and then I just added carrot because I have lots of carrots. I added about a cup of white bread flour in here because it was just pretty doughy still. And I haven't milled up any more flour, so I just added that in here. Our waffles are well on their way. This I am kind of just making up. I have a recipe that I'm following, but I substituted 1 of the cups of buttermilk for pumpkin, got our carrots grated, and then I just chopped them up with scissors so they'd be a little finer. And I think our hamburger buns are now ready to rise. So I'm going to get this dough in this bowl. Oh, there's 1 whole kernel of fresh milled, or 1 whole kernel of wheat in there. I'm going to get this sprayed with a little bit of oil so that it doesn't dry out on me. And then I'm going to get this over here and placed into my oven, which I just had the oven light on so that it is a little bit warmer. I knew I would be busy in here getting kind of warm, so I opened some windows for fresh air and to let some cool air in here so my kitchen is not super warm. So by letting it rise in the oven with the oven light on, it'll be a little bit warmer for it. I'm just going to use this mixer to mix up our waffle mix. So I can get this in here. There's a little bit of flour from the other recipes. That's not going to be a problem with our waffles at all. Carrots. I'm going to add some cinnamon to this. The recipe does not call for cinnamon, but we're making a harvest waffle, so I've just put in 1 tablespoon of cinnamon. I'm going to add some salt, and then I'm going to mix this together, and we will add the baking powder as soon as we add the flour to this. I don't think I need this kamut for anything else, so I'm actually going to substitute 1 of the cups of wheat. It doesn't actually say what kind of wheat for kamut because might as well use it up. I almost forgot the oil in this. I just reread my recipe 1 more time to make sure I didn't forget anything, and I almost forgot the oil. I just wet my hands and I'm gonna test this dough to see if it has kneaded long enough. I'm doing what's called the window pane test, and I think we're there. You see how stretchy that is? We've been kneading this, I don't even know, probably 15 minutes or so. I can see through it and it's not tearing. If it, well, just teared there, but if it was tearing right when I first started doing that and I couldn't get it thin enough to see light through it, I would need to continue to knead this. But I think we're good now at this point. It feels really nice. You want to make sure you've got good gluten development in this so that it holds together. And because we're going to be turning most of this bread, hopefully, into Uncrustables, I need a good structured dough. So I'm going to, let's see, let's set this here. Put this over here. I've got another really big bowl. The reason I have my big bowls out is because hopefully these are gonna rise a lot and they're gonna need this big bowl. So I've got my dough. These are gonna be very large loaves. It smells so good in here. And I'm gonna just put this onto itself a little bit, make it into a nice ball. Turn it over. We're gonna let this rise. I'm gonna cover it and pop it in the oven with the other dough. We have one more batter or dough to make before we have everything made, and then we can just start cooking and shaping things. So what I'm gonna do real quick is get my mixer though taken care of, because we're not gonna need this anymore. I can mix up the pancake batter by hand. I love having homemade pancakes and waffles made up in the freezer. And if you don't have time to set apart half of a day to do this, we started at 11:30. It's now 1:11. And I know that I've got to be done by 4 o'clock because I've got my nephew's birthday we're going to tonight. So I don't even have to worry about dinner, even though I'm doing all this cooking. If you just on a Saturday morning are gonna make pancakes, make double or triple the amount of pancakes you're gonna make, freeze whatever you don't eat, and then you can just pull them out. And have some homemade pancakes that I can throw in the microwave, throw in the air fryer, throw in the toaster oven, whatever you have and however you like to reheat things, and you don't have to get all this stuff out to mess it. I also like to keep bacon and sausage that's pre-cooked in my freezer so I can warm that up so we can have some protein with it. And or Josh or I will cook up some eggs if we want to cook eggs. But having waffles and pancakes prepped and ready to go is amazing. I absolutely love it. And the waffles were the first things to go last time I made these, and I'm excited about these harvest ones because they smell incredible. I'm not even loading those in my dishwasher. I just want to go ahead and get my pancake batter made up so that this can rest. I'm letting my waffle batter rest for a little bit before we go to cook it. And I'm gonna do a mixture of flours for this one because I do want to use up all that kamut that I ground up. So we're gonna start with, and I'm not doubling this recipe, I'm just doing a single recipe. 1 cup of soft white wheat and 1 cup of kamut. Baking powder, baking soda, cinnamon, salt, eggs, oil or butter, Greek yogurt, milk, vanilla. This is not in the recipe, but I'm going to add a little splash of almond extract and maple syrup. And then we're going to add blueberries to this, but I'm not going to add blueberries until we put it on the griddle pan. And I want this pancake batter to sit and hydrate a little bit with this flour before we actually start cooking it. Here's our pancake batter. Here is our waffle batter. I'm just letting these sit. I'm letting that flour hydrate for a little bit. So what I'm gonna do now is preheat my oven to 375 so that we can actually bake our bagels, because the last thing we need to do is actually measure out our flour. We actually have to grind it first, our flour for our bagels. This has a little bit of the kamut and soft white wheat. We're gonna go ahead and use that up. But because I'm making this recipe up, I get to decide what kind of grains I want to use. I think since I just have a teeny tiny bit left of this kamut, I'm gonna add some kamut, the rest of that, and then I am going to use hard white wheat. And I need 6 cups of flour.
If you are interested in a grain mill, I can link it in a couple different places. The one thing about this grain mill and a lot of other grain mills that I've looked at is they tend to go in and out of stock pretty frequently. So sometimes when you go to look, they'll be there and then sometimes they won't. So just know that. And I can also link where I have bought my grains from. I have gotten my grains from Amazon, and I've also bought them from Azure Standard. And so I'm going to be placing another order for some kamut and spelt. I bought just little tiny bags of that the first time I ordered it because I wasn't sure if I was going to like it, and I do like it, so I will be buying some bigger bags next time. And the wheat that I go through the most is a hard white wheat, which has more gluten in it. That's the one that I ran out of on this day. Well, I refilled my container. I just have a tiny bit left. And then soft white wheat, I go through those the most. But because I ran out of my hard white wheat, I've been using my hard red wheat, which is another good grain for yeasted things. It has more protein in it, and I've really been enjoying the flavor. The cool thing about grinding your own flour is that it has such a more complex and in-depth and delicious flavor than just white all-purpose flour. And the different varieties, there's so many different varieties you can choose from. Each one of them has different properties that make it good for different things and different flavor profiles, which is pretty cool. And at first it was super overwhelming and confusing to me, but the more I use it, the more comfortable I am getting with it, and I'm finding it to be really, really fun to kind of experiment with different flavor profiles and different textures.
We've now ground all the flour that we are going to need today, and I need to add 6 cups of flour to our, it's 1, 2, no, this is 2, 2, 3, 4, that's 5.5 cups. So we'll start with that. We're gonna add our baking powder and we're gonna mix this up. I'm gonna mix my baking powder up a little bit with my flour, and then we're gonna mix this together. Now I need to place an order of more kamut. Last time I ordered kamut, I only ordered a 2-pound bag because I wasn't sure how well I was gonna like it. The flavor is fantastic, so I'll order probably a little bit more this next time. And then I need to order another 25-pound bag of hard. You know, it's probably good I put less flour in this because this is whole grain versus last time when I made these bagels, it was equal parts white flour to cottage cheese. And this obviously is gonna absorb more liquid, so it's good that I just added a 1/2 cup less flour to this. And I might even need to add a little bit of, well, let's see. Nope, I think this is probably good. I was gonna say I could add a little bit of Greek yogurt to this. Now I need to get these dishes in this dishwasher. Normally, when I start a big cooking day like this, I would start with an empty dishwasher. I only had about 1/4 of this dishwasher full. Ooh, it's more than 1/4. I thought it was only 1/4. I'm gonna do a little bit of rearranging. I'm gonna get these dishes in here and I'm gonna get this started so that my sink doesn't just completely end up being just covered with dishes when I'm done with this big cooking day. I'm just gonna get this started as soon as I get it full. I probably should have started it before. Each one of our 5 doughs/batters are done. My oven just preheated for my bagels, but I think I'm gonna wait on those because I'm pretty sure this dough is ready, to be shaped. And because this is a yeast dough, I need to work with it when it's ready. And I think this dough is ready to be shaped as well. So we're gonna shape those before we start cooking any of that, because I can start cooking my pancakes, my bagels, and my waffles while the yeast rolls, or buns, I should say, because these are hamburger buns, have their second rise.
Now this is my hamburger bun dough right here. And I am just gonna eyeball equal shape dough balls and go from there. I could pull out a scale and weigh the dough so that each dough ball is equal in weight so that they're pretty evenly sized buns, but I'm okay if some are a tiny bit bigger and some are a tiny bit larger. I did not want to take the time to weigh it out. Sometimes I do that, sometimes I don't. And today was not that day. We had enough that we needed to get to on this day that I wasn't going to worry about pulling the scale out. Hamburger buns took me a while to kind of figure out how to get them to be the shape of a hamburger bun. When I first started making hamburger buns, they would always be way too tall and too small. And I realized that, I don't know if I watched a video or what, but at some point I realized that you really need to flatten out your dough quite a bit into more of a disc shape as opposed to a round ball, because dough does a pretty good job rising up, but it's not going to spread out, at least yeasted dough. And once I learned that trick, then I was able to get a flatter hamburger bun, which makes it much easier to eat. Because by the time you put, the hamburger patty and the cheese and the lettuce, or the sloppy joe mix like I'm going to do with these buns, or a pulled pork slider, if they're too tall, they're hard to get your mouth around once you put all the yummy fillings inside. So if you are new to making hamburger buns, make sure you flatten them out more than you think, because again, they will rise up, but they will not rise out. So when I would make these really tall round hamburger buns, a lot of times we would end up having to kind of scoop out a lot of the bread in order for us to be able to, eat our hamburger or bun with whatever yummy fillings we put in. So what my goal for these hamburger buns is to get these made up and then freeze them so that the following day I'm able to do a bunch of protein meal prep and like dinner meal prep. And my thought is that on some day I'll be able to pull out the Philly cheesesteak sloppy joes that I make the following day, pull out a bag of hamburger buns, and on whatever day we end up eating these, I will literally just have to reheat the sloppy joe mix, let the hamburger buns thaw, cut them in half, either toast them up or not toast them up, top them with some provolone cheese, and I have a delicious homemade meal where I don't have to do any of the work. So that's what I'm thinking. I love to cook. I love setting apart part of a day to do a bunch of prep like this. I don't always get to it, but when I do, it does save me in the future so that we can rely on this effort that I put in on this day instead of falling into the trap of getting takeout or whatever it might be on nights that either I don't have the time or the energy, desire to cook. I can just pull something out of the freezer and we can enjoy a home cooked meal. We still eat out, but Josh and I have definitely tried to make it more of something we do with intention as opposed to out of reaction. At least that's kind of my goal. My goal is for us when we go out as a family, or if I go out with a friend, that it is more intentional instead of reactionary. And so by having prepped stuff in my freezer, we can be more intentional when it comes to those types of things. And I do like setting aside time to do these big batch cooking days, but I don't always get to it. So when I have run out of stuff in my freezer, then I do, like I said earlier, where If on a Saturday morning I decide to make French toast instead of just making, 3 or 4 slices that we need for that day, I will turn the whole loaf of bread into French toast so that I can slowly fill my freezer with convenience items. So at this point, the hamburger buns have been shaped. They are back in the oven with the oven light on to rise for the second time. I did put a piece of parchment paper over the top of them so they wouldn't dry out. And now I am going to shape this sandwich bread. And it's at this point I'm thinking, wow, this is a lot of dough for my baking pans. The recipe said that this amount of dough should make 2 5x9 loaves of bread. And they do make beautiful 5x9 loaves of bread. They're just huge. And so I think that what I could have done if I had one more loaf is I probably actually could have got 5 loaves of bread out of this amount of dough if I had an extra loaf pan. I was thinking I would have liked to do that, but I only have 4 loaf pans. So at this point, I'm pretty sure that I am going to just have very, very large loaves of bread, which is fine. So I'm getting these loaves of bread into my baking pans with a piece of parchment paper on them. I just like that because it makes for super easy cleanup. I'm going to put a little bit of olive oil, or not olive oil, this is avocado oil on the top so they don't dry out. I'm going to cover them and let them do their second rise. And then here we have our, quote, high protein bagel dough. And this stuff tastes absolutely delicious. It does not rise as much in the oven as the all-purpose. You're going to see what these look like coming out of the oven. But the flavor of these is fantastic and the texture was really, really good. So I think next time I make these, if I use fresh milled wheat, I will actually increase the baking powder just a bit. I don't have that much experience making this type of thing using fresh milled flour. And my guess is that because fresh milled flour is heavier than all-purpose flour, it could use a little bit more of the leavening agent to give it that puff it needs in the oven. But even still, these turned out great. And these I am purely eyeballing. My goal was to get large bagels for turning into breakfast sandwiches and small bagels to turn into bagel bites. But I end up just making large bagels for breakfast sandwiches because I don't have any breakfast sandwiches in my freezer at this point. And I was thinking it would be nice to get 2, 4, 6, 7, 14. That's how many we end up getting, 14 breakfast sandwiches in my freezer. So instead of using half of this dough to only get bagels for 7 breakfast sandwiches and then the other half to get bagel bites, I thought it would be better to have 14 total bagels in the freezer. And you'll see me the following day make the sloppy joe mix and make these into a pesto cranberry cheese, egg, and bacon sandwich. And they turn out so good. And I think there's something super magical about being able to grind your own flour at home. It's just crazy to me that you can take their seeds, basically wheat, berry are seeds. If I planted those in the ground, they would grow into more wheat, and you can turn that into flour. I don't know why, but I just think there's something incredibly empowering about being able to do it at home and just really satisfying about being able to take what would be basically inedible raw and grinding it up, adding some ingredients, and being able to turn it into basically endless possibilities. Wheat is such a fundamental thing that most of us cook with on a regular basis, making breads or buying breads, or it's a staple thing, turning wheat into pasta or whatever it might be. And we have the ability, if you have a grain mill, to do that in your own kitchen, which I think is pretty cool. So here, if you look at the dough pretty closely, you can see a little bit of the cottage cheese curds that I did not fully blend in. Again, these still turn out totally fine. They're absolutely delicious. They freeze and reheat really well, just like the all-purpose ones that I did the previous time, but I will blend up the cottage cheese a little bit more when I make these again. And I was just thinking, when I blended up the cottage cheese last time I made them, maybe my cottage cheese looked like this, but because I was using white flour, I couldn't actually see the curds in the bagels. But I can see it with this wheat flour. Once they bake up, you can't tell that there's cottage cheese in it. I personally do not like cottage cheese, never have, and you can't taste the cottage cheese in these. If you're someone who doesn't like cottage cheese, you won't be able to taste it. It kind of melts into the dough and just creates a yummy bread product.
At this point, the dishwasher is going. The 2 different yeasted breads are rising, and our bagels, they're not really bagels, are shaped. And I had the thought, I'm not even gonna put a hole in them because I'm gonna turn all of these into breakfast sandwiches. I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 here. I was gonna make some mini ones to make some pizza bites, but I think 14 breakfast sandwiches is actually a better number for me than doing like half of these as breakfast sandwiches and then the other half as bagel bites. I think I'm gonna mix this real quick, it's gonna be loud. I'm just reusing this bowl since I already have to wash it. I think Josh would rather have 14 breakfast sandwiches in the freezer than having bagel bites. I might still do bagel bites tomorrow if I feel up to it, because I do have one more thing of cottage cheese in my refrigerator, but we'll just see how it goes. I'm gonna do some other breakfast meal prep tomorrow. I'm gonna do like a pizza pocket, but we're going to stuff it with breakfast items as opposed to pizza things. In my house, the 2 meals that I like to prep for the most are breakfast and dinner, and with some lunch. But lunch, we rely heavily on eating what we had for dinner the night before usually. That's something that both Josh and I enjoy. And so lunch is usually not the harder part for me. It's usually breakfast and dinner. So that's why I generally meal prep more of those items. I'm very unlikely, unless it's a Saturday morning, to make a breakfast sandwich on a work day. And by prepping a bunch of them, say 14 of them at one time, I can enjoy, or Josh can enjoy, or anybody in my family can enjoy a breakfast sandwich without having to go through the effort of making it on the day we want to eat it. And it looks like I did not blend up the cottage cheese as much as I did last time, so hopefully that is okay. And obviously this is a very different recipe than I did last time because we're using the fresh milled wheat as opposed to using, let's see, can I get all of these on in here at one time? The white flour. I am not gonna put, am I gonna put everything but the bagel seasoning on these? No, I don't think so. Let's see. These are going to be a pesto egg sandwich, so I don't want everything but the bagel on them. I don't think. Do I? Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and sprinkle a little bit on there. That'll add a nice crunch and a nice saltiness to it. I'm not gonna add quite as much as I did last time because I think I added a little too much last time. These are gonna take a while, probably 15 to 18 minutes, I would guess. I have a mountain of dishes to wash by hand, but this is the perfect time because we have this oven going with the bagels or breakfast sandwich bread, whatever you want to call it. And now what I think I'm going to do is get my griddle onto heat because we need to make pancakes. I need to get my waffle maker on, and we can start cooking our waffles and our pancakes at the same time while we wait for these to finish rising and for these to finish rising. These are going to be huge. I almost think I could have made 5 loaves of bread. They're still not ready to go in the oven. So I'm going to get my griddle pan heating. And I'm going to use these 2 burners, even though I've got a middle burner that I could use, because I'm less likely to make my stove a complete mess if I only have to have my batter go from here to here. And I need to get out blueberries. These are the last of the blueberries that grew on our blueberry bushes last year. And one reason I wanted to get blueberry pancakes made up is I want to go through these delicious blueberries that I've not been going through. My pancake batter I'm going to set here. I'm actually going to move my waffle maker over here. I'm going to have a little waffle pancake assembly line going. And I can, if I need to, I'm going to make small pancakes and small waffles. This is like an Eggo waffle size waffle maker. It only has 2. I really just need to buy the one that has 4 because I could get this done twice as fast. When I bought this one, I didn't realize they made ones that had 4. This is the shaped waffles my family likes the best, as opposed to Belgian waffles or the square waffles. I grew up with a square waffle maker, but I really like these. I think the Eggo size waffles freeze beautifully and toast up beautifully. My pancake batter there for just a second. So let's see, I think this is ready to go. Usually the first couple pancakes and waffles don't always turn out perfect, but this has had time to absorb the liquid. I usually put 1 plus a little bit in each one of these.
Friend, I completely forgot how delicious blueberry pancakes are. I cannot even remember if I have ever or when the last time I ever made blueberry pancakes was, and they are so good. Now, this batter is a little bit on the thin side. You can see I end up putting 2 pancakes down, and I think, these pancakes are going to be a little thin. I like a little bit of a thicker pancake, so I do end up adding a little bit more flour to the pancake batter, but they turned out so good. Blueberry pancakes are delicious. And the Harvest waffles, you're going to see them come out of the waffle maker in just a minute. They are so yummy. Something about the carrot adds a little bit of sweetness, and the pumpkin, it just adds a little bit more complex flavor with the cinnamon. So good. And pancakes and waffles are definitely 2 of the easiest things to start with when it comes to making fresh milled flour things that are 100% fresh milled, where you don't add any all-purpose flour to it. Because you're not working with yeast and you're just using some baking powder or baking soda or a leavening agent of that sort as opposed to yeast, it is so yummy to have 100% fresh milled. The flavor is phenomenal, and the texture is always really good too. There is definitely a difference between making store-bought whole wheat things and fresh milled. There is a higher moisture content in wheat berries when they are freshly ground than when you purchase whole wheat flour at the store. They do take some of the germ and bran out. I don't know what percentage or anything like that, but I just know that it's still not the whole grain, and there's less moisture because it sits there and dries out. And so when you freshly mill your wheat, the one thing that I was always surprised about when we started making fresh milled things is that things didn't have that kind of dryness to them that sometimes I associate whole wheat with. And that's because they have a higher oil content, the actual berry itself, and a higher moisture content. So look at those loaves of bread. They had risen enough to where I was ready to put them in the oven, and I know that they're going to spring a little bit up in the oven, and they're going to get even bigger. And so those loaves of bread are huge, and they they still turn out perfect. You're going to see the following day, I don't slice into the loaves of bread on this day because I wanted them to cool completely, and I wanted to be able to let them cool, and then we're going to turn them into Uncrustables. And I didn't want to slice into them until I was ready to do that. But I can tell you at this point, we have used the bread for some sandwiches. One morning I felt inspired, so I turned some of the bread into some French toast, and it was delicious. Definitely way better than when I attempted to make up my own recipe. I tried to make up, like I said, my own 100% fresh milled sandwich bread by just converting my standard white bread recipe into a fresh milled recipe, and it was not successful. It tasted good, we ate it, but the texture was not one that anyone would consider a success. And I think the key though, because I've now read a lot of recipes and I've been experimenting, the key when it comes to converting recipes from flour, from white all-purpose flour to fresh milled is you need to have a higher moisture content of actual liquids, whether that's milk or water, and you need to let the flour, the fresh milled flour, hydrate in that liquid before you either go to turn it into pancakes, or you go to turn it into waffles, or you add the yeast and actually let the rise. You want the bran and germ to have time to absorb, and you actually do want the dough on the softer, stickier side when you start, because that bran and germ is going to need that moisture to absorb so you don't end up with something super, super dry. So at this point, it's just getting in there, going from one project to the other. I have all the pancakes done. I have the waffles going through. I did not double the pancake or waffle recipes, and I got so many pancakes and waffles. I am really excited to have those in my freezer. Those are my go-to, and I have been out of them for, I think, 3 weeks, maybe a month now, because I didn't make pancakes last time, but we went through the waffles so quickly, and I just really like having those in my freezer because they're so easy to warm up. I personally warm them up in the microwave, and I put them in the microwave for about 30 seconds to 45 seconds, and they're nice and warm, and you can top them with butter, syrup, jam, applesauce, whatever you like to top your pancakes and waffles with. You can top your pancakes and waffles with those things. I have a little bit more of our harvest waffles left to go, and everything else is cooked and out of the oven or off the stove. Let me tell you how good these pancakes are. I forgot how much I like blueberry pancakes. These have completely cooled. These have a little bit more cooling they need to do. I think what I could have done is got 5 loaves out of this double recipe, and they would have been a little bit better shaped. They're a little funny shape, but I think they're super soft, and they definitely are the best 100% fresh milled loaves I have gotten so far. And I think they would look even prettier if I had either 1, a bigger pan for them to bake in, or 2, I just didn't use quite as much dough. This one's a little funny shape. We'll probably just end up having this one with sandwiches, and probably these 2 we will turn into our Uncrustables. And I don't know, maybe I'll make some French toast. I'm not sure. Here we've got our buns. Our hamburger buns are super soft. They are going to be delicious. I've already made this recipe and I know we love it. And these turned out really, really well. They are a little bit flat compared to when I used 100% white all-purpose flour, but I think I could have shaped these a little bit different. I think they still will make a delicious breakfast sandwich. Tomorrow I'm going to turn these into a breakfast sandwich. These are going to be for our sloppy joes that we have this month. I'm trying to decide. I don't think I'm going to cut them in half until I thaw them and we go to use them. These are going to turn into our Uncrustables. These are just going to be pancakes for us to eat for breakfast, and then the waffles are just going to be for breakfast as well. I'm going to get these into some bags because they are completely cool at this point, and I'm going to get my pancakes into some freezer bags. I don't put any parchment paper or anything like that between them. As long as everything is cool to the touch, they don't stick together in the freezer.
So I can just stack them like this, and I can pull however many out we want for breakfast. And the nice thing about having this amount of different meal prep is everyone can choose what they want for breakfast. No one has to have all pancakes or all waffles or whatever. If someone's in the mood for a pancake, they can have pancakes. If someone's in the mood for waffles, they can have waffles. And if someone wants a breakfast sandwich that I'm gonna prep tomorrow, they can have a breakfast sandwich. So this is just part 1 of part 2. Tomorrow I'm gonna be back and I'm gonna prep a ton of lunches and dinners, and then I'm gonna turn some of these obviously into other types of breakfast items. So if you wanna watch more videos though between now and my next upload, let me pop some videos here you can go enjoy between now and my next upload. And if you're new, consider subscribing because you don't wanna miss out on any of the fun freezer meal prep we're gonna do. In this bag, I'm mixing waffles and pancakes. That's gonna be totally fine. Actually, my waffles are not completely cool yet, so I'm not gonna put those in the bag yet. I'm gonna let these cool, but I don't mind mixing waffles and pancakes. So friend, thank you so much for being here. I will see you tomorrow.